These individuals right here, okay, right now you see the Puerto Rican guy, that's Rap. And you see the other guy, that's 50 Cent. And the notorious 50 Cent.
It's a lot of people walking around now with scars on them because of 50. Them took losses because of 50. And some people ain't here because of 50.
Before 50 Cent, whose real name is Curtis Jackson, ever made the name famous, it originally belonged to another man. Kelvin Martin was the first person known by that nickname. He was a small but feared figure, about 5'2", and roughly 120 pounds, often described as carrying 2 long-barrel handguns in his waistband, including a .357 and a Colt .45.
Man, I mean, this boy was so fierce that he had 2 long-barrel revolvers with him, trademark. Always had him. He was like a modern-day gunslinger.
In 1980s New York, Kelvin Martin built a reputation that blurred the line between the streets and the early hip-hop scene. Stories from that era say he once robbed LL Cool J of his gold rope in a White Castle parking lot and targeted members of Whodini for their jewelry. He also reportedly ran a protection scheme where he acted as both the threat and the supposed protection. In a strange twist of history, he later appeared on the back cover of Paid in Full with Eric B. and Rakim, standing beside some of the same artists his reputation had once intimidated.
50 Cent was just anybody and everybody, your next door neighbor, the guy you hear about, the street legend, your friend, what I'm saying, your brother. It's so many different 50 Cents, you don't know which one came to the party.
On October 20th, 1987, someone came for Kelvin Martin. He was shot in a stairwell in Crown Heights and died at 23 after 4 days in the hospital. The shooter was said to be a teenager who later claimed he had been kidnapped and forced to do it. That left a question people still ask. Who really wanted Kelvin Martin gone? And how did his name end up becoming one of the biggest brands in hip-hop history? Let's get into it. Kelvin Darnell Martin was born on July 24, 1964 in the South Bronx. People in the neighborhood called him Lil Shaft. His parents separated when he was around 8 years old. According to family members, his mother pinned a note to his shirt, put him on a city bus, and sent him across New York to live with his grandmother Irene Martin in a Puerto Rican neighborhood in the Bronx. The arrangement didn't last. Eventually, the family relocated to Brooklyn, where Martin ended up in Unit 11H of Building A in the Monument Walk section of the Raymond V. Ingersoll houses in the Fort Greene projects.
Kelvin Martin actually grew up here in the Ingersoll houses, which is right next to the Walt Whitman houses on Myrtle Avenue.
This was the late 1970s. New York City was broke. Factories had closed and city services were cut. Fort Greene was one of the hardest hit areas in Brooklyn. Martin chose the streets early. By his late teens, he had his first charges. Street hustling and petty stick-ups were almost a rite of passage in Fort Greene in the late 1970s. But one detail set Martin apart. He never hid who he was. No mask, no alias. He robbed people face to face and dared them to speak up. Martin built a crew of teenagers from the Fort Greene projects called the Brooklyn Zoo. Their rule was simple: rob anyone, anywhere, by any means necessary. But the scale made them stand out. The Brooklyn Zoo hit nightclubs across the city. They worked the Latin Quarter, one of hip-hop's biggest venues in the mid-80s. They hit Harlem World and the Roxy. The move stayed the same. Walk into the club, spot people wearing gold chains or carrying designer bags, then strip them on the way out. Later, the crew fenced the jewelry and purses for cash. In Brooklyn, the pattern continued at local spots. The Brooklyn Armory, Empire Rollerdrome, and Albee Square Mall all saw the same thing. If a crowd gathered in Fort Greene or nearby neighborhoods, the Brooklyn Zoo showed up to work. Martin even went to a Rick James concert at the Meadowlands Arena in East Rutherford. Not to watch the show, but to rob fans in the crowd. While many in Fort Greene moved into the crack trade, Martin avoided it. His targets were the dealers themselves. Stash houses and dealers carrying cash were easier targets. The logic was simple. Drug money was already counted and bundled, and victims could not easily call the police. Martin also built a protection racket. He approached store owners and dealers offering protection from violence and vandalism. Those who paid were left alone. Those who refused were robbed or had their businesses damaged. He was selling protection from himself. After time in prison, Martin returned to Brooklyn and linked up with a local crew connected to a Supreme team set based in Fort Greene. This was not the famous Jamaica operation run by Kenneth and the Griff, but a Brooklyn crew using the same name. The added muscle expanded Martin's reach beyond Fort Greene. The results showed on his body. Over the years, he was stabbed several times and shot at least 24 times across 9 separate incidents. He survived them all until the last one. Even though he was never indicted for murder, people in the neighborhood claimed he was responsible for as many as 30 bodies. But the robberies that made Kelvin Martin a borough-wide legend were not the ones that paid the most. They were the ones involving hip-hop stars. The most famous story involved LL Cool J. In the mid-1980s, LL was rising fast after the release of Radio in 1985. According to several accounts, Martin approached the teenage James Todd Smith in the parking lot of a White Castle in Brooklyn and took his solid gold rope chain at gunpoint. Some stories say Martin later gave the chain to his daughter.
And even caught LL Cool J parking lot pimping in a White Castle in Brooklyn, where he ran up on Mr. Smith for his solid gold rope.
Then there were the Whodini robberies. In the mid-1980s, Whodini was one of the biggest rap groups in the country, known for hits like Friends, Freaks Come Out at Night, and 5 Minutes of Funk. They were selling out arenas and moving huge numbers of records. Martin and his crew reportedly robbed members of the group. The Eric B. and Rakim story is more complicated. For years, the street version claimed Rakim had his signature gold medallion snatched right off his neck. People from the neighborhood later said that part was exaggerated. What wasn't exaggerated was Martin's real connection to Rakim's circle. He became close with Eric B., Eric Barrier, and eventually moved around with the Paid in Full posse that surrounded the duo. In 1987, when Paid in Full was released, Kelvin Martin appeared in the photo on the back cover. The picture was taken outside the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center with Eric B., Rakim, Cool G Rap, and several other Brooklyn and Queens figures. That contradiction defined Martin. He was robbing hip-hop artists while also standing beside some of the culture's biggest names, even as his crew kept hitting the same clubs where those artists performed. There are several stories about how Martin got the nickname 50 Cent. The most common says it came from his robbery mindset. He would rob anyone for anything, even if they only had 50 cents. Another story says he once walked into a dice game with 50 cents and left with $500. Others claim it referred to his size. Martin stood around 5'2" and weighed about 120 pounds, like a $50 compared to bigger men. Whatever the origin, the name carried serious weight in Fort Greene. When people there said 50 Cent, they meant the small guy with 2 long barrel guns who robbed people in broad daylight and never covered his face. That reputation later caught the attention of 50 Cent, born Curtis Jackson, when he was looking for a stage name in the late 1990s in South Jamaica. Jackson said he chose the name on purpose because it reflected the same survival mindset. The choice also had another layer because of the connection to Kenneth McGriff, also known as Supreme. Jackson would later become one of McGriff's loudest critics, even recording the song Ghetto Cran, which directly described Supreme's criminal operations.
Supreme was the businessman and Prince was the killer.
By taking the name of a Brooklyn robber who moved in the same era and circles as Kenneth McGriff's associates, 50 Cent, born Curtis Jackson, was planting a flag in territory Supreme considered his own. By the fall of 1987, Kelvin Martin had made plenty of enemies. Drug dealers he robbed, store owners he extorted, and crews he crossed. When someone robs people openly for years without hiding his face, the list of people who want him gone grows fast. Martin had been staying with his girlfriend, Precious Golston, at her apartment in the Albany Houses in Crown Heights. On the night of October 20th, 1987, a teenager from the neighborhood named Julio Acevedo came by the apartment. He and Martin left together around 10 p.m. Soon after, a resident found the 23-year-old Martin on a 7th floor landing, bleeding from gunshot wounds to the head, chest, and stomach. He was taken to Kings County Hospital Center, where he survived for 4 days. On October 24th, 1987, Kelvin Darnell Martin, the original 50 Cent, died from hemorrhaging. He was 23 years old. A man who had survived being shot 24 times in 9 different incidents was finally killed in the stairwell of his girlfriend's building. According to testimony that came out later in court, Acevedo had not acted on his own. A drug dealer who later became a government informant, Richard Bush, described the plot. Bush said several local dealers who were tired of Martin's robberies and extortion kidnapped Acevedo and his cousin. The message was direct. They told him to bring Martin downstairs and kill him, or his cousin would die. Acevedo was a teenager. He went up to Golston's apartment, convinced Martin to come downstairs, and shot him in the stairwell of the Albany Houses. He later described the situation himself, saying his family and his own life were threatened if he refused. At first, Acevedo was convicted of murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. But after Bush's testimony supported the kidnapping claim, a judge overturned the conviction. Acevedo eventually pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter and was released after serving about 10 years in prison.
The district attorney pointed to Acevedo's long rap sheet in the move for a manslaughter charge. Among a number of crimes, the defendant served a decade in prison for manslaughter.
The story of Julio Acevedo did not end when he left prison. On March 3, 2013, more than 25 years after the killing of Kelvin Martin, Acevedo was driving a BMW northbound on Kent Avenue in Williamsburg. Reports said he was speeding, estimated around 70 miles per hour, weaving through traffic and changing lanes before crashing at the intersection of Wilson Avenue. His car struck a livery cab. 2 passengers in the cab, a young couple, were killed on impact. The woman was 7 months pregnant. Emergency surgery delivered the baby, but the child died the next day.
What do you want to say to the victims' families?
Once again, I apologize. I can't stress remorse no more than I have. I have stressed it to you several times already. It's not, I can't bring it back.
Acevedo jumped out of the BMW, looked at the wreckage, and ran. He fled New York City entirely. 5 days later, on March 7, the warrant squad of NYPD arrested him in Pennsylvania. During coverage of the hit and run, reporters investigated Acevedo's past and uncovered his connection to the killing of Kelvin Martin. The man who had killed the original 50 Cent was back in headlines, this time linked to the deaths of a young couple and their unborn child. A court in Brooklyn sentenced Acevedo to 25 years to life for 2 counts of second-degree manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, and leaving the scene of an accident. Because of his prior record, he was classified as a persistent felony offender, which triggered the enhanced sentence. Kelvin Martin lived 23 years. He became one of the most feared figures in Brooklyn, a small but notorious stick-up kid from the Fort Greene projects who robbed people openly, targeted nightclubs and dealers, and survived being shot dozens of times. His enemies eventually arranged his killing, and a teenager named Julio Acevedo was forced into the situation under threat to his family. Most people today know the name 50 Cent as the stage identity of 50 Cent, associated with success stories like the album Get Rich or Die Tryin' and major business deals. The name originally belonged to a real Brooklyn robber who carried heavy handguns, stole from rappers, and appeared on the back cover of Paid in Full with the same artists his crew once targeted. He died at 23 in a stairwell in the Albany houses after 4 days in the hospital. Curtis Jackson later said he chose the name because it represented self-reliance and survival. The brand survived and became huge, but the original story ended with violence and loss.